thought that would just never happen. Maybe President George W. Bush and the people working for him and supporting him thought that when he appointed Samuel Alito to the Supreme Court, maybe he wasn't choosing a Republican Supreme Court justice who would overturn Roe versus Wade. Previous Republican Supreme Court justices had refused to overturn Roe versus Wade. George W. Bush had even more reason to think it possible that John Roberts would not overturn Roe versus Wade when he appointed John Roberts to be Chief Justice. In fact, John Roberts voted to overturn Roe versus Wade and assigned the writing of the opinion to his George W. Bush teammate Samuel Alito. The entire world knew that all three of Donald Trump's Supreme Court justices would overturn Roe versus Wade because he said during his winning presidential campaign that he would only appoint justices who would overturn Roe versus Wade. No other presidential candidate had ever said that. The standard campaign line from Republicans about Supreme Court justices before Donald Trump was that they had no litmus test, that was their phrase, no litmus test for Supreme Court justices. Even though George W. Bush made it clear that he personally opposed Roe versus Wade, he never said that it was a requirement for justices appointed by him to overturn Roe versus Wade. That was Donald Trump's intemperate innovation. And it won Donald Trump the White House because extreme anti-abortion Republican voters did not trust Donald Trump on abortion, and for very good reason. They heard the replay of his comments to Howard Stern about how disappointed he was in 1993 when his girlfriend told him she was pregnant with the child who would become his second daughter. Donald Trump told Howard Stern that when he heard his girlfriend tell him this is what he said.
But you know, at the time it was like, excuse me, what happened? And then I said, well, what are we going to do about this? She said, oh, are you serious? This is the most beautiful day of our lives. I said, oh, great.
Not, isn't that wonderful? What are we going to do about this? There were only two options, an abortion or a baby. Donald Trump made it very clear to Howard Stern that he got the answer he didn't want to hear. The girlfriend was going to have the baby. That's how she became the second Mrs. Donald Trump with the shortest tenure as a Trump wife. We have no idea how Donald Trump felt when the third Mrs. Donald Trump broke the news to him that she was pregnant with his third son. Men in 20 states are not allowed to ask women, what are we going to do about this? When a woman tells them she is pregnant. Not anymore. Donald Trump took that away. He took away that conversation from those people. Donald Trump took away the rights that enabled him to say to his girlfriend, what are we going to do about this when she was pregnant? Donald Trump is telling American men, you don't get to have the option that I always had whenever anyone told me she was pregnant. Donald Trump could say, what are we going to do about this? Every single time to a wife or a girlfriend. And now people are dying. Women are dying. The choices made by George W. Bush and Donald Trump are now killing people. ProPublica is now reporting about the death of a 28-year-old woman in Georgia who died because of what George W. Bush and Donald Trump did to her when they appointed those Supreme Court justices. Amber Nicole Thurman was a healthy 28-year-old medical assistant who was the mother of a 6-year-old boy. And the choices made by George W. Bush and Donald Trump and the Republican Supreme Court justices and Republican politicians in Georgia, using the tools that those Supreme Court justices gave them, killed her. ProPublica reports, in her final hours, Amber Nicole Thurman suffered from a grave infection that her suburban Atlanta hospital was well equipped to treat. She'd taken abortion pills and encountered a rare complication. She had not expelled all of the fetal tissue from her body. She showed up at the Piedmont Henry Hospital in need of a routine procedure to clear it from her uterus called a dilation and curettage, or D&C. But just that summer, her state had made performing the procedure a felony with few exceptions. George W. Bush, in his silent retirement in Texas, made that routine medical procedure a felony. Donald Trump is proud to noisily take credit for overturning Roe versus Wade and claiming that we all wanted that to happen, and he is pretending that he has no blood on his hands. Donald Trump is pretending that he had nothing to do with making a procedure, a routine medical procedure like a DNC, a felony. Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight if the Supreme Court had not handed the 2000 presidential election to George W. Bush. Without George W. Bush's appointees to the Supreme Court, Amber Nicole Thurman would be alive tonight. She would be a healthy, happy mother of her young son, who was forced by George W. Bush and Donald Trump to attend his mother's funeral at age 6. When I was 6 years old, my mother had the same medical procedure that Amber Nicole Thurman desperately needed to live. My mother had given birth to 5 healthy children, but she kept going. She was trying to have a sister for her only daughter, trying for one more. And she suffered a miscarriage, and she routinely had a DNC at a local hospital in Boston years before abortion was legal, because DNC has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. None of the Catholic nuns teaching me at my elementary school then thought my mother should not have that procedure. Our beloved Monsignor Brandley knew that when mothers in St. Brendan's Parish had miscarriages, the doctors should give them whatever treatment they needed. Anti-abortion Catholic doctors performed that procedure routinely. There wasn't a single Irish Catholic politician in Boston, including the mayor and the district attorney, who ever tried to interfere with that medical procedure. Their sisters were having that procedure. Their daughters were having that procedure routinely in anti-abortion Boston, because it has nothing to do with abortion. Nothing. If a politician interfered with that procedure and killed my mother when I was 6 years old, who's going to tell that boy? Who's going to tell that 6-year-old how his mother died and who is really responsible? The DNC procedure was routine in many areas of the country long before abortion was legal. Outlawing that procedure is sheer madness, criminal madness, murderous madness. Outlawing the DNC procedure is as insane as outlawing in vitro fertilization, which anti-abortion Republicans want to do. IVF has nothing to do with abortion, but every Republican, every single one of them in the United States Senate today, except for two women Republican senators, they stood up, they voted against a bill to guarantee the legality of IVF in all 50 states. The bill required 60 votes to pass the Senate today. It got 51. And 44 Republicans playing politics with reproduction voted against it. And that was enough to kill the bill. That minority in the Senate was enough to kill the will of the American people and the will of the United States Senate. Donald Trump insists that he personally is in favor of IVF, but he did not order his vice presidential candidate, Senator J.D.